We've all seen it. This picture of Senator Bernie Sanders, socially distanced, crouched in his foldable chair, legs and feet crossed with a mask, wearing his cute mittens, and essentially what people call a dad's outfit. He's in a park, he's on a roller coaster, he's in a restaurant, and basically wherever in the world you decide to drag and drop him. But in all seriousness, what is so great about this photo itself? Today, here we are, we stand at the 1-year mark since the taking of this photo by the AFP photographer Brendan Smialowski. Based on what I've gathered in the past year, today I'll share my thoughts and opinions from the perspective of a photojournalist. So to begin our search, we go on to Getty Images because that's basically where the originals of the photos are uploaded, and that's the largest photo marketplace from which newspapers source photos from. So Bernie Sanders. If you just filter the photos by the decreasing level of popularity, you basically see that this is the all-time most popular photo of Bernie Sanders. I'll briefly run you over a list of things that I noticed right off the bat in terms of the technical quality of this photo. First of all, Bernie is in focus, which is incredibly important. He is kind of center-placed. He is not exactly in the center, but then that doesn't really matter as much. It is properly exposed, I would say. The photographer could have made it one stop brighter, but then either way it's alright really. Clearly, the horizons in the photos are straightened. The white balance is on. There's one more thing that's worth mentioning, which is strictly speaking not technical. It's the fact that you could clearly identify this person as being Bernie Sanders, not just in the physical form, but his political brand as a politician, as a political persona. So those are pretty much the merits that I was able to find in this photo. Now on to the questions or reservations that I have. It mostly has to do with these two random passerbys in the bottom right corner of the image. These two people to me look absolutely random. They're almost as huge as Bernie in the frame. They took up as much space as the subject itself. So technically this photo is sound, but then artistically it's rather bland. This actually brings us to a really interesting question as to why the photo was shot in the first place, and secondly, why was it published? In order to understand this, let's take a look at what Brandon's portfolio is like. You will be surprised. There we go. This is him on his website. Let's use this project that Brandon did in relation to the former President Trump as an example of his photographic styles and techniques that he often likes to incorporate in his work. That's President Trump, cut in half though, against the background of the national flag of the USA. Again, President Trump, cut in half. I'm not sure if this is intentional to be honest, but there is a use of slanted lines and misaligned horizons to create a sense of movement and direction in a photo. This is a reflection play. At this point, I think this photographic style of Brandon is starting to emerge, in which he likes to use off balance as a technique to convey a sense of surprise. And from this photo, we do see that he likes to play with perspective as well. The president is taller photographically than the helicopters, than the tanks. So this is a detailed shot of Trump, also with his face cut off. I think what we said so far kind of comes together in this photo, where you could see that there is clearly an intention to separate a photo into the foreground, the midground, and the background. So in the foreground, it's obviously Trump's feet. And in the midground, you see a banner that kind of resembles the national flag of the USA. And in the background, you see a crowd who is crazy about Trump. So the way that Brandon took the photo and then put it into his portfolio shows that he does have his own philosophy in terms of how he conveys something out of a wider context, incorporating the element of surprise and movement or action in his shots. Moving on, okay, we have another shot that's framed from inside the car. Another shot of Trump waving with his hand obstructing part of his face. Here we have a shot again where Trump and the Queen was placed way towards the leftmost edge of the photo. Okay, this is a rather standard photo, I would say. Okay, so there we are, back to the first one. If you look at this set of photos versus the Bernie photo, the most obvious difference would be the fact that all the photos that he put in his portfolio are contrasty black and white photos that often plays with light and is very thoughtful. We can tell that he's a very seasoned photojournalist because it's not easy to find moments like these in really standard and typical types of press events. This photo is nothing Brandon considers to be representative of his artistic style. In fact, that's what Brandon himself said in an interview that he did with Rolling Stones. Quoting him, he was saying that the picture itself is not that nice, it's not a great composition, I'm not going to be putting this in a portfolio. He's being really candid here. No photojournalist is going to ever use that in their portfolios. In fact, not only photojournalists, whatever photographer you are, it's not something you would typically put in your portfolio. Put it that way. Based on what I know in this space of photojournalism/documentary photography, most photographers, while they are known for one thing, they do have another side of them that's kind of different, but that's still them, just that they don't market themselves with that. In this case, we see that happen as well, but then I think this is like on another level, in a sense that this discrepancy between what Brandon brands himself for is in a really stark contrast with this photo. At the end of the day, I think it's just a job. It's a job of a press photographer to identify all the important people who are relevant in a certain event, be it celebrities, politicians, and take photos of them. They don't have to be artistically pretty photos. Any photographer who's in that scene would have got the same thing, pretty much. Rather, I would say that the awareness of who's who and what they're doing there and what they represent, what they stand for, is way more important than the photo itself. It kind of just becomes second nature to hunt for the people who are important, because you know that there will be a demand for these photos in the press. They don't really have to be nice, because most of the time, especially if it comes out in print, the colors are gonna look garbage anyway, and in many cases they are gonna be cutouts of the person. For instance, in the Daily News, it was a massive headshot of Bernie. You barely see his shoulders, and so really the composition doesn't really matter that much. Another example of this would be, again on Daily News, that's a huge, really tight crop into Bernie's head. Here we have, again, a Bernie headshot cut out in a corner. And here we have another cutout. So the composition does not matter nearly as much as the fact that the person, in this case Bernie, being clearly identifiable, in focus, and properly exposed. Earlier on, we also mentioned there being these random strangers in the bottom right of the photo. And I think this does shed some light as to the state of mind that Brandon was in. I don't know him, I've never spoken to him, but then this is what I probably would have done were I in a similar situation. If I thought that this was a really strong shot that's literally gonna make the photo of the day or a winning shot, I would most probably have waited for these people to leave. It's just a matter of a few seconds, I think. But then if I think it is like an alrightish shot, I would have still taken it, though I would not have put in that amount of effort, because I knew that there would be other more important things on my list that I'll have to capture as well. So the fact that there are these people in this shot kind of shows you what Brandon was thinking of this shot. There is definitely something going on, in a sense that Bernie was really in his habitat, really comfortable, that it really reflects who he is. At the same time, it's not even worth like a 2-second wait for these people to leave the frame. In this bit of the interview, he was like, in this case, the moment was pretty quick, so there was no shooting after. But then when I took this picture, my camera was on somebody else. He goes on to elaborate as to why there are so many other targets that he has his camera pointed at. It's just basically a really typical situation that press photographers find themselves in. With these kind of events, there is a story to it, and there are people who are relatively more relevant to it, and so obviously you would have to put your focus primarily on these people. But then at the same time, as he mentioned, but when I shoot, I like both eyes open. So you keep one eye looking through the camera, but you keep the other eye open so you can see what's happening around you. So basically, this photo was a result of Brandon originally intending to focus on some other people, and happens to accidentally see Bernie, went over to take a few shots, and then went back to where he was originally focusing on. It's fair to assume that this photo was taken in haste, not just based on like how the photo looks and what Brandon says, but then in general, in these sorts of events where there are so many things happening and obviously these photos are really important, photographers are under a huge time constraint. I think this photo is a raw photo that wasn't really manipulated, that's being sent directly to AFP, the agency. If you've been watching up to this point, I presume that you are a photographer And you might be wondering, what does it mean for you as a photographer and what does this mean for your work? The first thing that really said to me is that among photographers of the caliber that Brandon is at, there are a lot of things happening in the back of the head. For instance, for this photo to have happened at all, firstly, the photographer had to understand who Bernie is, what his political brand is, type of impression that he really wants to give off to people. Secondly, on such a busy day of the inauguration of President Biden, he'll have to identify who is who, where they are, arrive early, do the research, be familiar with the context that he's gonna work in. Thirdly, the photographer had to juggle between the different things on his agenda because on a large-scale event like this, different publications are going to want different things and they're going to have a different angle, slightly different angle. And needless to say, the technical competency to nail the shot like this in one go, and also to establish a credibility to an extent where you're let in the premises at all. So this is a great example of how there are a lot of factors that will have to come into play, that will have to come together for a famous photo like this to be made. Obviously, you'll have to have a great deal of knowledge inside of photography, but then arguably, it has to do more so with the knowledge outside of photography depending on whatever your area of expertise or your interest is. In this case for Brandon, it's US politics. This photo of Bernie is a really interesting example, and if you're interested in learning more about the photographer who took it, Brendan Smialowski, refer to this full interview that he did with Rolling Stones, which I've linked in the description down below. He did make some really legit points that I think you will learn a great deal from. Once again, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next Saturday. Bye!
Brendan Smialowski.
Smialowski.
Brendan Smialowski.
Smialowski. Okay.